Welcome to DevOps Accents, a podcast on everything around DevOps, public cloud, and cloud-native topics, with your hosts, Pablo, Leo, and Kirill.
Hello and welcome to another episode of DevOps Accents. This is me, Leo, and here with me, as usual, Pablo. And for those of you who aren't quite familiar with us or are new here, we are MKDev, where we, with the help of our in-house experts, we provide consulting and engineering services for our cloud, for your cloud infrastructure and data and AI. More details in the link in the description. And here on DevOps Accents, we discuss all things around DevOps and industry as a whole, inviting guests and experts from different domains with different accents and backgrounds, not limiting to IT specifically, but something that might influence your day-to-day job and decision-making processes. So stick around and make sure to be subscribed. And as some of you know, we've been into security audits lately at MKDev, conducting SOC 2 and ICO 27001 audits to help companies comply with data protection measures and whatnot. And this is very interesting area in general. This is why we decided to invite and talk to our today guests and dear friend, Katarina Pranjić. Welcome to the DevOps Accents.
Oh, thank you so much. It's lovely to be with you today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. So Katarina, she's head of regulations and policy in economics crime at LexisNexis Risk Solutions. You might know this company because it's one of the largest data analytics companies in the world that provides data analytics and technology solutions for businesses in industries such as insurance, healthcare, financial services, and law enforcement. And there, Katarina oversees the entire economic crime prevention market within the United Kingdom and Ireland, such as anti-money laundering, identity verification, fraud prevention, and most importantly, the application of data and technology in these domains. And you are also a chair board member at Open Identity Exchange. Is that correct?
Yes, used to be. OX is no longer to be, but it was nice fun. It lasted. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And before we dive deeper into what you are doing at LexisNexis Risk Solutions, how you end up there, my favorite question to all my guests, given the name of our podcast, what is your accent?
Should we leave the audience try and guess? They would never. So I'm originally from Croatia. This is why I have a blend of different accents. I would say I did spend last 6 years in the UK. So I guess you can hear a little bit of that when I talk as well. But yes, originally Croatian.
Did you learn to speak with British accent, or it came naturally?
No, it just happened. Sometimes I hear myself and I surprise myself, but I never really tried it. It's just that, you blend into your environment and suddenly it just happens. So it's not my fault.
Great. Thank you. All right. And let's speak about your IT accent, right? And to which domain you belong and how you end up there. Can you give us a little overview of your career, how you started and how you ended up in crime prevention, your regulatory area where you are today? Was it a choice or is it just happened organically?
Oh, yeah, it was a calling. No, I like to joke about it, but I do think there is some truth in that as well. I think for me, it just happened. It happened naturally. Same thing as that accent. But while I was in my student days, as many other people, I was probably very confused about what I wanted to do. And now I know why. It's because the job that I wanted to do didn't exist back then. So studying law, wasn't really happy. I didn't think that was something that I wanted to do. And in my student days, I accidentally ended up being in the right place in the right moment, finding out about KYC. KYC is short for Know Your Customer. So I was just supporting some admin work around onboarding clients and basically checking their data. It sounds really dull and administrative, and probably is for many people. But because I had been studying law at that time, I started to read the regulation, and I wanted to know a little bit more of why we are doing what we are doing, right? One thing led to another. This is how I started my career. I started to enjoy a lot learning about Know Your Customer and anti-money laundering. And little by little, I started to connect with the people in the industry. I started to, attend all the events, started to work on my certification with ACAMS to become certified anti-money laundering specialist. And then I became obsessed with the topic. The more I was reading, the more I wanted to know. Obviously, some historical events led in that direction, that this topic had become really, really important. And that part of regulation, anti-money laundering and terrorism financing, kind of expanded to economic crime. And what was really important for me at that point was to connect not only all the important bits of anti-money laundering, but how did it proceed? Because you have 3 different stages in anti-money laundering. So you have placement, you have layering, and integration. So to me, to work on prevention of the money laundering, I had to understand how did dirty money even become. And you would be surprised how it's all interconnected, from human trafficking, drug trafficking, all these horrible crimes really that are related to dirty money that leads to all these 3 stages, made me wonder what more we can do. So I started career being a person who is in charge of the admin stuff on the AMLs in the AML world. Very soon I then realized those kind of things are complicated, difficult to handle. There's a lot of data. It's all in paper. This can be automated. So I started to play a little bit, started to be a little bit creative around the processes. And very soon when I started to exchange some ideas, I was very lucky that one of the people that I was exchanging these ideas with was from LexisNexis. So from my role as a practitioner, I was offered to move to London and basically start working with a company that is designing solutions to prevent economic crime. And this is how I started to work as a solutions consultant first, basically exploring this different kind of solutions that can help you prevent financial crime and comply with the regulation. And from that, one thing led to another. I was connected with lots of internal teams that work on thought leadership, people who are within product, lots of different people who work on the sales part of the organization, obviously. But then the most important part for me was that I was in the center of all the major conversations that were to have in the United Kingdom, where you have so many different professionals that exchange some brilliant ideas. So to me, that was the moment when I started to work with trade associations. I started to work with regulators, other experts. So that was the main moment when I then expanded my role from just simply being a person who is in charge of anti-money laundering to somebody who is now overseeing also fraud, identity, credit risk, because they are all interlinked. I'm going to pause here because I'm talking a little bit too much, but you get the sense how this happened probably naturally and because of my curiosity in that topic and huge passion I really have for anything economic crime related.
Katerina, for the people who is hearing us, to understand the difference, I think that when we are talking about the financial crimes, we are talking about 2 kinds of crimes, no? For example, one kind of crimes that is the one, imagine always the one that everyone is thinking. You are in internet and then you receive a link and then you go there, they are doing phishing and then you put the data and then steal your money. Or they go to one bank and they steal money. At the end, it's something like it's the money that one kind of person belongs, and the other one steal the money. So like this kind of thing. And the other kind of crime is the crime that the government with the taxes decides what is a crime and what is not a crime. Because this other kind of crime is, for example, if you are living in a country with no taxes, this kind of crime that, for example, in UK could be a crime, in other countries, like for example in Doha, it's not a crime. So only to understand, there are two kind of crimes, because in one is what the government want to, I don't want to say steal to the citizens, but what the government want to take from the citizens. And the other kind of crime is the crime that, let's say, the bad guys are doing to the people. It's like that, or I confused?
So different kind of crimes and different exposure to crime, not only country related, but industry related as well. What you're talking more ethical dilemmas, maybe, but when something is within the legal framework, and if we're talking about taxes here, I wouldn't go into that, because what one country might allow and have different rules to another is one thing. What I'm here talking about is fraud, as in scamming, identity theft, using financial institutions to send the money to build terrorist organizations and cells around the world, sell, buy weapons, human trafficking, drug selling, all these horrible crimes that when you do. So let me put it this way. Whatever happens within the criminal underground, if you like to put it that way, whatever is illegal and illegal money that is being proceed, for that money to enter financial institutions and to appear legitimate, you would need to clean that money. So to be able to clean that money, you will have to use different channels, and there are different industries vulnerable to those channels in different ways. So, for example, crypto, before it was regulated, was one of the channels that was used, so the money would be transferred without being noticed, or so that nobody would be checking who is behind that transaction, because financial institutions already had regulation in place that asked them to track and to identify all the parties. So that KYC that I was talking about basically is a process where you're to open an account in a bank, you need to show who you are. So somebody's verifying your identity, so we would know that you're not a wanted terrorist. So we would know that if you are a politically exposed person, for example, so some other measures would be put in place. So we would then track those transactions to make sure that you're not exposed to corruption because your position is vulnerable to certain crime, which doesn't mean that you're not to have the service. It just means that the tracking of those transactions is going to be a little bit more specific than the other ones. When we talk about that's only gaming, gambling, then you have different kind of fraud attempts or money laundering channels when it comes to different other industries, from legal sector, accountants, telecom companies. They're all part of this regulatory scope where we need to know two things. First one is, who is your client? So you need to know whether the person you're working with is a legitimate person, who they say they are, that they don't appear on some of the watch lists, right? They're not fugitive, they're not wanted in some country. But then you also need to ensure that the person you're doing business with is actually doing the exact thing that they established the business relationship for. I'll give you an example. If we are to have transactions, then I would need to know if you are to deposit a large amount of cash. I would need to ask you, where is this money coming from? Because that would be one of the signs in our community that you might be getting that cash from drug dealing, for example. So we need to explain where is the money coming from. Digitally, because everything is turning digital these days, now it's a little bit easier to track, because we can now track those transactions and see the sources of funds, as we call them. So we need to, when there is an enhanced risk, I would say increased risk, we do enhanced due diligence on certain individuals, companies, or transactions to establish the source. Where is it all originating from? So we would ensure that the money is not being proceed from crime, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So basically, we are talking about all kind of crimes that one person does to another person, and not like that someone misinterpret the law and did something wrong against their own government or something like that. So more like when some villain wants to steal money from another person, like if to put it simple. But what interests us the most is that in our digital era, basically, the amount of data we pour in the web creates a great opportunity for mischiefs to steal our money in a more efficient way because of how much we talk about ourselves. And do you think it's creates like it's helped them? We basically help them to improve their quality of their work and the way how they steal our money and how they mimic our identities. And we discussed this a little bit before, and how synthetic identities are transforming financial fraud, and it's expected to rise by 500% by 2027. And can you tell us about how like digital revolution reshaped the fraud landscape, and how we can detect this fraud, the attempts to do something bad for us, like specifically about those Frankenstein identities, what they are, and how it is different from synthetic identities.
We have blended lots of different themes in this one question, so I'll try to unwrap a couple of them one by one, and feel free to interrupt me if I'm talking a bit too long about any of them. So fraud is a very, very specific topic because it evolved in the last decade, I think, even more, but I'm observing last decade because to me it's fascinating what has been happening. Currently in the UK, fraud makes for 40% of all the crime. That is a shocking stat for me. It's something that shows that it's not only a burning issue, but that, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I guess, about the regulation and how the governments are addressing this problem. But what has also evolved is that fraud no longer targets just elderly people or people who are not tech savvy. These days, anybody can be a victim. Have you ever been in touch with scammers?
Yes,
of course. Pablo, you?
You mean physically or
digitally, physically? Have you been targeted by scammers?
Okay, I think that everyone receives daily these links and events,
Yeah, right. So it's concerning that I haven't yet met a person who said no, which means that it's all around us, right? So we had fraud, and specifically, I'm going to be talking a little bit about identity theft as well. Historically, being done in physical form, so somebody might have, stealing your data, physical letters, trying to find out your address, trying to pose as you, I guess. These days, because everything turned digital, and ever since COVID, there are so many different factors that we need to unwrap here. So there's been some geopolitical changes in the world. Because of the economic crisis, people are attracted to some opportunities where they can earn money faster if there are some investment schemes, and human curiosity on top of that, of course. Then you have, obviously, the growth of technology and how everything's turning digital, and we are digitally present, as you said, and so is our data. We become targets a lot easier if certain data leaks would happen, or even if just the data that we do hold on ourselves is being publicly available to somebody who can be very creative with that. So the change that has happened in the last 10 years, I think, is that from individual fraudsters, there were just people who were trying to find a way to either trick you into something, to commit authorized push payment fraud. People who would try to steal your identity are now organized crime gangs. So we have networks of people working, using best of technology, using AI, having different training in place so they would be able to trick as many people as possible and to have some financial gain out of that. What is really important to mention here, so this is a different topic to synthetic identities. We'll come to that part a little bit later because that is a completely different problem. When we talk about identity theft as an example, it's incredibly easy to use AI these days and deepfake to clone somebody's voice, to pretend to be somebody else, to try and attack financial systems or different account opening platforms. So you would then be able to build a persona that looks like somebody else. So you would then be able to access the services. So that problem is being addressed not only with the technology and different developments on the end of the companies that provide identity verification solutions or fraud prevention solutions. The only way to address the problem when it comes to fraud and organized networks that now commit fraud, and to address the scam centers that we have discovered, mostly, and some of them actually being and growing around Southeast Asia at the moment. The only way to fight them back is not only by having the right regulation or having the appropriate technology, because technology can be used on both ends, but it's the power of the data sharing, and it's the collaboration among the market and the companies that actually are able to detect real time whether a certain persona has been appearing within different channels, trying to commit fraud. So if you're able to address that real time, then you can warn the others. And this is how you can basically be very reactive and really fast to prevent damage from being done. That being said, there are obviously lots of different challenges if you were to talk about that collaboration and data sharing, but you were also interested in how AI is helping in that process and how it's transformed.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is like the emerging topic, right? We've been attending so many conferences this year. In 2024, like I don't remember 17 or 18. Pablo, you can correct me. But everywhere we go, everybody talks about AI. Everything is AI now. Any new startup, you take anything, and they are AIs powered by AI based, or based on some artificial intelligence API or things like that. If you are not AI, you are not on the market, basically, right now. And this is kind of concerning, because we all saw this social commercial where all the parents sitting in front of the TV and watching their daughter talk to them, like, "Hey, mom, pop," things like that. And then she starts saying that, in fact, I'm not your daughter. And this is not my voice. This is not my appearance. This is everything that you are talking today, right now, is based on all the pictures, all the video recordings, audio recordings that I shared online. And you parents who just have a newborn kid, please be aware of this. And when you post about it, when you post yourself on internet, and when you post your kids on the internet, there are people who use this data to create a fake identity for you using AI. And I don't know to what extent artificial intelligence is involved in that. Probably there are neural network, right? It is not AI, but it's kind of related. But you can use neural network to mimic someone else's appearance and mimic their voice. But as the technology evolves, so is frauds. They are evolving as well. How, do you even can fight this and prevent this and track and find a difference between a fake identity and a real person? How do you do that?
The cloud tech industry is evolving so fast. Do you keep up with it by improving your skills or upskilling your team? At MKDev, we offer a variety of workshops for just that, from the basics to expert knowledge. Before delivering our workshops and training sessions, we carry out a detailed assessment of each participant. To make sure the workshop is helpful for you and your team, we will add more content to it or throw out what you already know. Or we create a custom workshop specifically for the needs of your team and the specifics of your project.
Sometimes, but it's really difficult, and it's difficult for people who are experts in this space, and it's even more difficult for people who wouldn't even pay attention, because often those interactions happen. They create scenarios or environments where something is urgent. They build the pressure. People are not to pay attention. And even if you do, sometimes it's just impossible to say. They say that human brain can analyze up to 7 different information simultaneously. AI can do about 1,000. So while you can impersonate somebody using deepfake, it's very difficult to say that it's not the person that you're talking to. In terms of what data we have publicly on us, I mean, to a certain extent, I can understand that, but in another way, how far does it go? Do not hold any information about yourself. And if you don't, how is somebody who is to try and find out? Because if that is something that appears as a regular amount of information or the background information you would have on the individual, and suddenly you have none, you might even appear as somebody who is not building that kind of profile, let's call it that way, that would look legitimate. So it's a complex topic.
So it's a double-edged sword. You can share too much data, or you can not share at all, and this harming yourself in the eye of those who are trying to protect you because they don't know you.
I think, Leo, there are 2 major things that we need to address here. One is the responsibility of the companies that handle our personal data to do better in protecting our personal data, protect better from fraud, and to provide better channels to support us if we are suspicious that we are becoming a victim of fraud. The other one is us, where I think that we as a society don't put enough attention, enough education on financial literacy, on danger of cyber security attacks on us. Those kind of things where you need to build awareness and build the education, but also educate people when, how, and for what is their personal data used in certain cases, because without certain information, you can't fight back. So you have to be able to have something to work with as well, as I said in the beginning. But I think as the complex topic it is, we also need to think about in the whole this mess is, and I don't want to overcomplicate it again, but the people who are scammers, even when you think about why is somebody doing this, like who would want to build and work for the scamming center to do such harm to people? If you watch documentaries, such was one on BBC One, Catching the Catfish, there was a famous Instagram influencer who just wanted to investigate who are the people who stole his pictures that he's posting publicly on Instagram that are being used for the romance fraud. And the romance scam is not only financially hurting individuals on dating sites, but it was also bringing emotional damage to them, obviously. So it's heartbreaking to hear those stories. So he actually sits on a plane and he goes to Southeast Asia to face the scammers to see who those people are. I don't want to ruin it for anybody who might want to have seen the documentary, but the plot twist basically of that whole story is that people who are scammers are also victims of human trafficking rings. So they're being beaten if they're not being, if they don't hit a target of amount of people or amount of money that they need to hit that day to defraud somebody. So it makes you really think how deep this can go. And not to, again, overcomplicate everything, what we can do. So as individuals, I think, yes, we can share awareness. We can educate ourselves what the dangers are. We need to speak about it more. The couple of practical tips that I actually put in place with my own family, because I work in this space, I said to my parents who are elderly, if you ever receive a call, because they had received a call from somebody who speaks my language. So it was a native language to them, claiming to call from London to talk about certain securities that they have found on my name, and they wanted their information so they can do some transactions with it. But what I said to my parents, if I call you, if I look like me, if I sound like me, if we talk in our language and everything seems fine, but if I ever urgently ask you money, we have a passcode. If I don't say this word, never ever send the money. I will never forget this word. Nobody else except me and my parents know that. So I'm back to basic when it comes to how I deal with this with my parents. But there are different tips and tricks that you can put in place if you're just an individual fighting this. If you're a company, then it's a completely different story. You need to start thinking, how are you exposed to this? What kind of products do you have? Who are your customers? What are the vulnerabilities that you need to resolve? What is the best way to resolve them? Digital identity, and we spoke about this, Leah, previously, I remember. I think it's transforming the way that we are going to fight fraud, because our identities might be reusable, which means that we can store them in the wallets in the very near future. We can prove that we are who we are. But some people call that, it's a one-stop shop for fraudsters in the future, right? So that means that if somebody is to steal or has the access to your wallet, they have access to everything, because not only you will have your personal information and prove that who you are through that wallet, you can link that to your health insurance. You can link that to all different kind of preferences you might have in place that might be convenient to have, right? So the other way for you is then to think, if you are a company that deals with threat of physical identity threat, it doesn't make sense to have solutions in place that are going to detect digital identity fraud, right? So you need to, so this is a little bit of professional lingo, but you need to perform that risk assessment. So you need to identify what are you vulnerable in, and then you can basically build a plan and say, well, this is how we're going to do this. We need to train people. We need to hire people. We need to have technology. Are you exposed to AI threats? Well, you probably need to address them with AI back. How are you going to fight back if you don't have somebody using AI? I'll give you one example. Remember those transactions I said the banks need to monitor when you hit over a certain threshold? Now, there are AI solutions that criminals can use these days to identify and analyze what those rules might be so they can avoid them. So it's a cat and mouse game, right? So if they're using that, then you also need to have access to observe what are the current trends and how your system is being attacked. So real time, you can also respond.
So do I understand this correctly? Right. So people are attacking institutions, financial institutions on a regular basis and collecting data, how basically this institution reacts to the attack and defends from it. And then they analyze a chunk of data on different kind of attempts to defend from their own attack. And then they try to figure, using artificial intelligence, how it works based on how you respond.
They're trying to, so if you are attacking certain system, the AI is then measuring what scenarios could work, what didn't work. So they're trying to find a way around. So some of the cases that I haven't seen personally, but some were discussed in, events that we attend, were really interesting. So AI is being used for a couple of different use cases. One is obviously to automate the process of bot attacks, very common, to speed up the process of scamming, to enhance the automation. So you would need less people and more technology. Observing the rules of the financial systems. So basically you would then be able to recognize where might be a tiny loophole there where you can turn and your transaction could be unnoticed. They also use the fakes, as we said, to impersonate anybody else. But also what we are seeing is that they have started to build the network in terms of like creating a scenario for a long-term run, which means that they no longer are just looking for a quick turnover. Sometimes they will invest to create identities, or even so, not even just to create identities, but in certain cases, they will collect the information on the individual, attack in one institution, and then with that information that they might have collected, they will not have financial gain, but they will use that information to go to another institution where they will know that the individual might have more assets that they can use. So those kind of things where you can see that they're getting a little bit more sophisticated than they used to be, that can be a little bit scary. In another hand, I don't want to sound very pessimistic as if everything's turning horrible. There are so many people who work in this space who are observing this. So, for example, when we started to speak about that digital identity network that I've told you about, it's basically a place where you would have different kind of stakeholders in the market they can be very different companies building a consortium so they can exchange the data and they can observe those patterns. So that means that in the last year, so in 2023, we have looked into 109 billion transactions. So we can then identify what is the growing trend. And having that in mind, then we are building the rule sets so that can be identified so that the financial institution can actually address that and see the certain risk score in place so they can say, okay, if this is risky, what do I want to do? Do I want to make a different decision, or do I want to explore this in a little bit more detail? Okay, we can talk about it for probably hours, but I forgot to address something also very important that I just remembered. And that is synthetic identities, because all this that we spoke about was about identities and identity theft or digital identities. And synthetic identities that we slightly touched on is a completely different topic, because unlike the problems that we just touched on now, where the whole regulation, for example, or fraud defense systems, they are based on the presumption that individual who is the victim of fraud is going to report that they're a victim of the fraud, right? But what happens if there is no victim and there is fraud? There is a synthetic identity, so there is nobody behind. It's a Frankenstein identity. So basically, let me just walk you through what that means and why this complex topic is also really important. And we spoke about it in a little bit detail previously, and I tried to explain this in really simple language so I can summarize it really well. But what it means is that the growing trend where you would have certain fraudster, for example, whether if it's individual or the network, doesn't matter, to build identity combining the real and fake information. So this is why we call them, they have a blend of both. We call them Frankenstein identities because they are assembled from various pieces of
real
identity information.
Existing people's existing information, but for example, name from this person, birth of date of birth from another person, stuff like that.
Yes. Or variation. Even it can be a variation of that, or misplace certain character or another piece of information. So unlike the regular identity theft, where fraudsters here play for the long game, basically building the credit over the months or years, even before they're busting out. So this problem, in the study that we have done, we have identified that there was nearly 3 million suspicious identities in the UK. That increased dramatically from 2020 to 2023. It was more than 500%. 527% increase in highly probable synthetic identities. So that could mean that a certain synthetic identity, that was built to build a credit score, doesn't have to be used straight away. It can be used later. But with that fake identity that was created and looking good credit score, they can pose significant damage to the companies or to loan providers or anybody who is to allow them certain service. So because they're manipulating the existing identities and manufacturing completely new synthetic identities, we don't even know that they're there. We have no idea. So there are certain warning signs in that story. So for example, they would have lack of life story, if you like, or normal life cycle progression, no government records or passports or driving license, no family connections or associates, or multiple variations of the same details would be connected to them. And what is really important is when you look at them, and we try to connect. So through the analytical approach, you would then link certain data sets and you would find synthetic farms. So sometimes those would be addresses where there is a building, let's say, I'm just giving an example. If there is 7 flats in the building and you have 500 people living there, it's obviously not possible that you would have 500 people living there. So somebody's really using this address rather for the records than it's really for the living situation. So that growing trend is really dangerous for the companies that are relying on the information that they have, because many of them that they might not even know that they're created are already there. So who is to report this? Because nobody's reporting this. There is no regulation currently in place that would ask them to have to report back every single case so the rest of the network would know, you wouldn't be able to recognize it real time, which can pose damage to a lot more companies than it's currently doing.
One question, Katarina, because when I was working in FICO years ago, I remember that it was always with KYC, AML, and embargo, EMB. And it is super interesting because at the end is what you're telling, every transaction, for example, that it was happening in every bank, it was through this company, and then it was checking who was the source, who is the destination, and it was checking all the databases of the FBI, CIA, European Union, Interpol, checking who was this person. Always it was the same problem because it's something that is coming now, for example, with this digital euro. The idea of control everything, because for sure that there are bad guys, because always there are bad guys, always there were bad guys, there will be always bad guys. But for sure now that there is, because of a number of laws and a number of regulations to try to control. And I'm talking about the AML, I'm talking about the EMB and KYC, because at the end, the power of these big companies that they have about the people is crazy because they know everything and they are able to block a person if they want. So because if they're telling to you, you cannot make a bank transfer because you are this person, you are out of the system. So what I mean is that the same that is going to happen, because will happen because the government wants to do that with the digital euro, digital dollar, and all this kind of money, they are going to be able to control everything. So in one side is the power of the bad guys, that they know who you are, they make new identities, and in the other side is the power of the powerful people, the companies and the governments. So, and in the middle is the people, because the normal humans, we are in the middle. We are not the organization who track everything, and we are able to tell you cannot spend more money. This is my money, but you cannot do that. How is that working, for you?
If somebody today gets into your account and steal your money from your bank, would you expect bank to pay you back?
It depends of the country and depends of the regulation.
But personally, as an individual.
But what I mean is that it's not for me that I'm living where I live in. It depends where you live. And what I mean with that is depends if you put all the money in the same pocket, and depends of many, many things. What I mean is that for sure that there is a reason for many things, but there is an abuse of the reason for many other things. And for example, the regulation in many countries that they allow people to don't pay with paper. If I want to pay with cash, there are many places where it's not allowed. So these kind of things that are making, the people in the middle, something like, wow.
I want to answer your question about if I expect bank to pay me. I would say yes. But this depends on the reason, on what happened. Because if it's my fault, probably not. But if it's bank's fault, absolutely yes. Because there are so many layers that should prevent this from happening. Insurance included. So all my investment, all my bank account, they should be covered by insurance. And there should be some kind of protection from this fact. And I trust my bank specifically to save my money. And if they failed saving my money, I expect them to pay me back.
Yeah, I think that is an average response you would probably get from people who trust their banks or different other companies that handle their finances or personal data. They expect them to protect them, right? And that no malicious activity would happen. And I'll try to cover this fairly and offer slightly different perspective. Before I was in this space, I used to have a very similar view on this, as I think the majority does. And this is why I think building awareness is really crucial, because people get scared if they hear, oh, if we have an app that is using behavioral biometrics, any sort of my personal data to create any sort of indicator of the risk, or if it's to use it for any kind of tracking purposes, you feel controlled, you feel exposed, you don't feel safe. Well, in what I'm seeing genuinely in here and being in the industry, I'm quite the opposite. When I go to websites, I accept the cookies because I know what those cookies are used for. And I know how this can actually protect me. So there is regulatory wise and ethically, I would say, the different reasons to collect the data. There is one scenario which I don't want to discuss when people collect your data so they can get to know you better, so they can offer you services or more personalized adverts, those kind of things I'm not really interested in. And I have completely different view on that. What I will focus on is the data that somebody is collecting on us, so they will understand what my typical behavior is. So if something unusual were to happen on my account, would be immediately blocked. This is a real situation that happened in my bank. I was called one Monday morning saying that certain amount of money in a transaction has been blocked before they speak to me. It was fraud department from bank saying there were two transactions, big transactions coming from your account. One was gambling in Texas, and a couple of hours later, another one was in casino in China. Now, a good fraud detection system had to use my real location. They had to use my patterns, how I interact with my device. What they did is not somebody holding a file to say Katarina usually sleeps at 2 a.m. It's to say, following the patterns of your transactions, we have never seen you doing transactions in gambling and gaming sector 2 a.m. This is not typical behavior for this account. The amount that you put into that transaction is not really the usual pattern. And most of all, it's impossible to be in China and Texas in a couple of hours apart. So I was really pleased to learn that my bank was using all of that. And I was pleased that I allowed them to track my real location. Otherwise, this transaction would go through. This is one part. Data being collected for prevention of economic crime, for my own security, for the national security, if we talk about the terrorism, for me is a completely different thing. But I think it's more important to educate people what kind of data is actually collected, what do they know about you and how they're using that, because otherwise people might think that somebody's playing a big brother in this game and just trying to find out everything about you, which is not the case. You would have analytical tools that basically want to observe what good looks like, so they would be able to identify bad. Another thing is the regulation, and we touched on that, and how regulation is responding to that. So, Pablo, I don't know if you've heard, probably it's not as relevant in other countries, but it's significant movement because it shows the direction of travel. If you were a victim of APP fraud in the UK since 7th of October this year, both receiving and sending party have to compensate the victim up to £85,000. You're to be compensated if you're a victim of fraud. Now, what that means is that those institutions, first of all, government said we need to start addressing the problem. 40% of crime being fraud, we have to have better regulation in place. We have to have all the stakeholders committed to resolve this, not only individuals, not only government, but also we need the private market to address. So that's one thing. You're to be reimbursed. If you're to be reimbursed, the companies are going to care that whatever is happening on your account is being noticed, any kind of suspicious activity, right? And this is coming from the expectation where people say, if I trusted somebody with my assets, I want them to put the best measures in place so they would be secured. Just like 150 years ago, if you placed your money in the bank, you expected the bank to have good
swords with good shields
and all these kind of things. So maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but you get where I'm going with this, I guess.
Yes, but the fear of the people is still there. You know, and what I mean with fear is it's not an abstract movie. It's a realistic thing that, you know, you can, in the same way that everything is for the good of everyone, we back to the same point that everything is for the same way to control everything. You know, because, for example, the governments, they put all the regulation only because one reason, because they want to get the taxes. So in most of the cases, you know, all these government regulation are principle for that. You know, I want you to pay my taxes, and if you don't pay my taxes, then you are going to be a criminal. So, and the same thing, if you go, for example, again, if you are living in UK And after you are working, you need to pay taxes, and then you need to pay VAT. And the same thing, if you don't pay that, you are a criminal. If you go to another country, doing the same thing, you are not a criminal. So what is strange? But then is something like it's strange all the power and all the effort that the governments they put to get the money of the others. And I am not talking about the idea of the criminals, because always there will be criminals. But the problem is that the excuse of because of someone, always there is another rule, because there is no reason, for example, to have this digital euro. And the only reasons to have that is to have more control. And the people, the governments, they don't want people to use paper, as you were telling, because it's much, much better if I don't have cash and if I pay everything in a digital transaction, because everything can be controlled. And this is not going to change, because always it's going to be like that. There will be people who wants to control, and there will be people who is going to be controlled. And depends of the size of what you are, you're going to be up or you're going to be down. So, it's always the same. And always there will be excuses and reasons because to do something. And always is because there is a bad guy.
No, I wouldn't be using word control here. Monitoring in this space is something that is crucial. If you're not to monitor the information, the data that you would hold, there would be lots of threats exposed to the world. And there is no other way to deal with that than having the good insights. And this is not to find out about Pablo or Katarina. This is to find out about the bad players in the market that will distinguish themselves because their behavior is very different to ours. And sometimes it's not very different. Sometimes it's similar, and we are to identify that. So I don't think that anybody's controlling me if they are looking into my behavior, because I expect them to do that. So they would be able to protect me. Otherwise, they wouldn't know what is usual from the unusual, what is suspicious from the suspicious.
I also would like to add to that, because on one hand, I feel I experience the same concerns as Pablo just voiced, but on the other hand, we are living in the evolving world, and we use so many digital products, and we leave so many digital footprints in most cases we are not even aware of. And if we want to simplify this, we can get back to, I don't know, medieval era, when in order to prevent crime, people, so it was the government, the town, so bailiff of a town, they would issue a law that enforces people to use torches during the night when they work from one house to another. Because if you do not hold a torch, you are not lit and you look suspicious, right? So it's so use a torch to protect yourself and to prove that you are not a criminal. And some people might say, oh, you want me to highlight my path in order to control when I'm going, right? So you want to know that in the middle of the night, I'm heading from one house to another house. And some might say that. But it's just a simple example. But this is not like they want to control it. They want to help us increase the security. And but at the same time, we don't know we don't see all the picture, and we cannot see the intention of every party. But what we can do is to increase our awareness and help the companies to protect us. Because, for example, a lot of companies, they collect our data. And this is why we are making those security audits for them, to help them to store their data correctly and to help them to share their data with government, with companies like yours, Katarina, to work with that safely. And I think that the most important part in here, is for the companies to help us understand better what they are doing with our data. Because currently there are a lot of regulations. So I have to comply. Yes, this company stores my name, email, my location, things like that, cookies, whatnot. This is not very convenient, and this created a lot of noise when I'm browsing. But at the same time, it helps to improve data collection and data safety. And do you think there are any improvements in this area or in the future, how the companies can help all of us by collecting our data safely and dealing with it better, and giving it and sharing it between different kind of companies?
So we as a company, we don't collect personal information. We are not the one that would go and collect your PII for that purpose. We simply provide a platform that allows for that collaboration in the market. And that collaboration through consortium needs to happen, obviously, compliant to different regulation like GDPR or any other regulation that is applicable to the market where different companies might be working together to or be collaborating when it comes to consortiums. It has been proven really successful. It has been proven useful. Regulators see really great benefit, I would say, just by the numbers that we have managed to observe from how many different money mule accounts have we been able to spot, because having good insights means that you have more data to make better informed decisions, obviously. In the same time, there are obviously always going to be different debates about to be able to do more, you need to overcome certain hurdles. And sometimes that can be a little bit complicated because data privacy concerns are really important concerns, and the regulation around them can prevent you from doing certain exercises in a way that might be better designed for the prevention of the economic crime. However, if the two regulation would be, let's say, in clash, then you have to find a way how it's going to work. And this is, I would say, one of the biggest topics that were ever discussed in the economic crime space, because the power of the data is the only thing that can really help. But in the same time, you have to respect privacy, and you have to find a really good balance how you're going to do that in the compliant manner. So what has been achieved in the past, even couple of months, I would say, and it's a really big milestone. We call this initiative Article 75 because it's coming from the AML regulation that is now it's applicable across the EU member countries. A very similar initiative might be happening. For example, in the UK, we have a different regulation called Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Act that allows for the data sharing across sectors. Now we finally have regulation that has been agreed among the main authorities when it comes to financial crime authorities, so the financial crime experts and data privacy experts basically agreeing how is this going to look like, what kind of technology we need to have in place, how are we going to ensure that everybody's privacy being respected, that GDPR is being respected, while we also maintain and enhance data exchange.
Cool. So I think this is very important. And I feel like today we just basically scratched and make an introduction to the problem that exists in the data. And sadly, we didn't have enough time to discuss what we can do, how actually, what actual and measurement steps we can do to help us all. I think this is for another time. We will definitely have another follow-up episodes on that, because data privacy, data security, and infrastructure cloud security is the main topic for us, especially in the new 2025 year. And I suggest everybody stick around. And for those who wants to learn more, Katarina, very quickly, where they can find you and to learn about it a little bit more, because you are a bottomless pit of knowledge in this area. And for those who wants to know a little bit more, where they can find you.
LinkedIn's the best place to go.
Cool.
I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm quite responsive, I think. Always very happy to engage on the topic. I love, as I said, it's huge passion. So anybody who's interested or wants to talk about it, I'm always open to discuss if there is time, obviously.
Great. Thank you. I will make sure to have all the links in the description. I will try to collect more. And if you're interested, go down in the description section. You will find everything there. And please don't forget to be subscribed. If you enjoyed this episode, if you think we did great, give us likes. For you, Katarina, thank you very much for joining us today and give us this overview and introduction. It was very interesting. I have so many questions still, and I can't wait to continue in another episode. Thank you for coming. Those who listen to us, thank you for listening to us. This was great, and we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
There are no challenges that we couldn't overcome. Whether it is immediate infrastructure problems or planning a future project, we won't simply answer your questions. We become a part of your team to help you complete the mission. Our solutions consider the interests of your business and the combined expertise of the industry, as our staff is made up of more than a dozen experts in different areas who share decades of field-tested experience and knowledge with you.